Tema: How Spiritism Supercharges the Law of Attraction, my 7-day experiment. Introduction: How Spiritism Supercharges the Law of Attraction. Revised. You've visualized that, you've affirmed that, you've scripted, and you're still waiting for that breakthrough money, that relationship, that opportunity. If that feels familiar, you're not alone. In fact, millions of people practicing the law of attraction are asking the same quiet question in 2026. Why does it feel like I'm doing everything right, but nothing is fully clicking yet? 7 days ago, I was right there with you. I've studied manifestation for years. Neville Goddard. SATS. Assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Mental diet. Living in the end. I've had wins, but also long plateaus that made no sense. Then I noticed something most videos never address. Even Neville Goddard hinted at it, but never fully explained it. He taught assumption. He taught feeling. He taught state. But he rarely explained who or what responds when you assume. And that's where this experiment begins. Because in this new energy of 2026, when everyone is talking about aligning with your highest timeline and manifesting your best year yet, I realize there may be a missing piece quietly holding everything together. Not a new affirmation, not another visualization technique, but a framework that explains the mechanism behind manifestation itself. That framework is Spiritism. And before you tune out, stay with me. This is not about religion. It's not about superstition. And it's not about giving your power away. It's about understanding something the law of attraction never clearly defined. Backhand index pointing right. How intentions move from consciousness into reality. Backhand index pointing right. Why guidance, intuition, and signs show up during manifestation. Backhand index pointing right. And why manifestation often accelerates when you stop feeling alone in the process. According to Spiritism, codified by Allan Kardec long before modern LOA, reality is not empty, neutral, or passive. Consciousness interacts with intelligent layers of reality. In simple terms, manifestation isn't just psychological, it's relational. So I ran a 7-day experiment. I didn't abandon Neville Goddard. I didn't abandon the law of attraction. I integrated them. I combined Neville's concept of assumption, modern manifestation practices, and Spiritist principles that explain who assists when alignment is achieved. I used visualization but with directed intention, affirmations but emotionally and ethically aligned, meditation not to empty the mind but to establish connection. And the results were immediate. Within 1 week, I manifested an unexpected $500. I received guidance that changed how I approached decisions. And I experienced synchronicities so precise they felt engineered. This video is not asking you to believe anything blindly. It's a documented experiment. You'll see what Spiritism actually teaches, without mysticism or fluff. Why thoughts alone are not enough. How emotional coherence attracts assistance, not just outcomes. The exact daily practices I followed. And the results measurable, emotional, and undeniable. If 2026 is the year you want manifestation to finally click, not just feel inspiring but effective, this might be the missing piece you've been circling around. In the next chapter, we'll start at the foundation. Who Allan Kardec was, what Spiritism really says about influence and guidance, and why it may quietly explain what the law of attraction, even Neville Goddard, left implied. Let's begin. Chapter 1: Allan Kardec and the who behind manifestation. Before we talk about techniques, affirmations, or results, we need to talk about something far more important. The mechanism. Because if you've ever felt like your manifestations are hitting a wall, despite doing everything right, this chapter is for you. You visualized correctly. You affirmed consistently. You assumed the feeling. And still something felt missing. That almost working feeling isn't failure. It's a signal that you've reached the edge of what technique alone can explain. This is where Allan Kardec enters the story. And no, this is not about religion. Allan Kardec was not a mystic, a prophet, or a spiritual influencer of his time. He was a 19th century educator, linguist, and rational thinker living in France. More importantly, he was skeptical. When spiritual phenomena began capturing Europe's attention, table turning, automatic writing, trance communication. Most intellectuals dismissed it outright. Kardec didn't believe it either. Instead, he investigated it. He approached it the same way a scientist would. He asked structured questions. He compared answers across unrelated sources. He discarded contradictions. He kept only what remained consistent. What emerged wasn't belief. It was a model of how consciousness interacts with reality. According to Spiritism, human beings are not isolated minds trying to force outcomes through positive thinking. They are participants inside an intelligent field of consciousness. Thoughts are not just internal experiences. Emotions are not just chemical states. They are signals within that field. This is where the law of attraction gets very close but stops short. Modern LOS says, like attracts like, but it rarely explains, through what mechanism, responded to by whom, under what conditions. Spiritism answers with something both simple and unsettling. Reality responds through intelligence, not just energy. This isn't about praying to spirits or giving away your power. It's about understanding the intelligent field you're already part of, very similar to what Neville Goddard referred to as infinite intelligence or the higher self. When Neville taught assumption, he was teaching alignment. When he taught SATs, he was teaching receptivity. But he left something mostly implied. Who responds when alignment is achieved? Spiritism suggests the response comes from conscious processes already shaping probability, timing, and opportunity. Not God's, not fate, not external control, but consciousness interacting with consciousness. Kardec described spirits not as supernatural beings, but as intelligent entities at different stages of awareness. Some wiser, some confused, some indifferent, some helpful. Here's where manifestation becomes practical instead of mystical. Backhand index pointing right. Not every desire attracts cooperation. Backhand index pointing right. Not every thought receives reinforcement. Backhand index pointing right. Emotional, mental, and ethical coherence matters. This explains something many manifestation practitioners experience but rarely admit. Why does manifestation sometimes feel effortless, and other times exhausting? Why do some people attract mentors, lucky timing, and unexpected help, while others repeat affirmations endlessly with little movement? Spiritism would say, because manifestation is not just projection. It's relationship. When your internal state becomes coherent, emotionally regulated, intentional, and aligned, you become more perceptible within the intelligent field of reality. In simple terms, you're easier to respond to. This doesn't remove free will. It doesn't mean you're being watched or controlled. It means that cooperation becomes possible. This reframes signs completely. Signs don't appear to convince you. They appear after alignment as feedback. And this was the shift that changed my experiment. Once I stopped forcing affirmations, once I stopped emotionally chasing outcomes, and focused instead on coherence, things began to move. Not dramatically, not supernaturally, but intelligently. Emails arrived. Ideas surfaced. Conversations shifted. Timing improved. Manifestation felt less like trying, and more like working with the current instead of against it. That's what Spiritism adds to the law of attraction. The law of attraction teaches you what to think. Neville Goddard teaches you what to feel. Spiritism explains why alignment receives response. And in the 2026 energy of new beginnings and highest timelines, this relational approach may be the shift that makes manifestation finally feel effortless instead of exhausting. Chapter 2: The Daily Practices. Turning theory into a 7-day experiment. Understanding a framework is one thing. Applying it, consistently, calmly, and without forcing, is where manifestation either accelerates or collapses. Especially in 2026, when so many people are chasing New Year energy and fresh timelines without stabilizing their inner state first. That's why this experiment wasn't about doing more. It was about doing less correctly. From the start, I set one non-negotiable rule. No rituals. No mysticism. No emotional chasing. If Spiritism truly complements the law of attraction and Neville Goddard's teachings, it should work through coherence and clarity, not intensity or belief. So I structured the entire 7-day experiment around 3 daily practices: simple, repeatable, and intentionally unglamorous. Because real alignment doesn't feel euphoric. Feels steady. Practice 1. Coherence before desire. Most manifestation systems begin with asking. This one begins with regulating. Every morning before thinking about goals, money, or outcomes, I ask myself one grounding question. Is my emotional state coherent right now? Not positive. Not excited. Not high vibration. Just coherent. Which means calm instead of reactive. Focused instead of scattered. Grounded instead of rushed. According to Spiritism, emotional turbulence creates static in the intelligent field of consciousness, and static blurs response. Neville Goddard hinted at this when he emphasized feeling over repetition. But the feeling isn't excitement. It's inner agreement. I spent 5 minutes simply stabilizing my state, breathing slowly, releasing urgency, and letting my nervous system settle. This alone removed more resistance than months of affirmations ever had. Practice 2. Intentional assumption, without forcing. Once coherence was established, I moved into assumption, but with a crucial shift. Instead of affirming what I wanted, I asked, if this desire were already unfolding intelligently, how would I move through today? Not how would I celebrate? Not what would I post? But how would I act, choose, and respond? This is where Neville's work unlocked a deeper layer. Assumption is not pretending. It's positioning. Spiritism reframes assumption as a signal, not a demand. You're not commanding reality. You're showing readiness to cooperate with it. For about 5 minutes, I allowed the afterstate to feel normal, not exciting, not dramatic. Familiarity is powerful. It tells the intelligent field, this fits me now. Practice 3. Meditative receptivity. This practice produced the most noticeable shifts. And it's also the most misunderstood. This meditation was not about silence or emptying the mind. It was about receptivity. For 10 minutes, I sat without affirmations, visualizations, or requests. I held a simple internal orientation. I'm open to clarity that supports aligned action. No expectations. No searching for signs. No spiritual theatrics. What came through wasn't mystical. It was functional insight. Ideas surfaced naturally. Old mental loops became obvious. Better timing revealed itself. Spiritism teaches that guidance rarely arrives as voices or visions. It arrives as clarity that feels obvious in hindsight. This redefined intuition for me. Not emotional. Not dramatic. Just usable. Daily structure summary. Days 1 to 7. Each day followed the same rhythm. Emotional coherence check 5 minutes. Intentional assumption 5 minutes. Meditative receptivity 10 minutes. Live normally without monitoring results. This last step mattered more than any other. I did not scan my day for signs. I did not measure progress emotionally. This is the real, set it and forget it. Not ignoring your desire, but trusting the intelligent unfolding once alignment is established. And something shifted quickly. By day 2, urgency dissolved. By day 3, resistance softened. By day 4, movement began. Not miracles. Adjustments. An email that changed timing. A conversation that reframed options. An idea that removed friction instantly. This is what manifestation looks like when it's relational instead of forceful. Subtle. Precise. Effective. And in 2026, a year focused on new beginnings and highest timelines, this approach may be the difference between chasing alignment and finally living inside it. Chapter 3, Days 1 to 3. When resistance dissolves and movement begins. The first 3 days of the experiment were not dramatic, and that's exactly why they mattered. Most people expect manifestation to announce itself loudly. Sudden money, instant messages, emotional highs. When that doesn't happen, they assume nothing is working. But Spiritism and Neville Goddard, if you read him carefully, point to a different indicator. The earliest sign of alignment is not results. It's relief. Day 1, the collapse of urgency. Day 1 had nothing to do with outcomes. It had everything to do with detachment without suppression, something most manifestation teachings misunderstand. That morning, after completing the 3 practices, coherence, assumption, and receptivity, something subtle but undeniable occurred. The grip loosened. The desire was still there. The intention hadn't changed, but the pressure disappeared. This matters because urgency isn't motivation. It's resistance wearing effort as a disguise. Neville warned about this when he spoke of effortless assumption. Spiritism explains why urgency blocks cooperation. It signals lack, not readiness. As the day unfolded, I noticed less mental repetition, no impulse to check reality, a surprising sense of internal space. Nothing external shifted yet, but internally the system recalibrated. And that recalibration is the foundation of everything that followed. On-screen text. Relief is the first manifestation. Visual. Slow ocean waves, steady rhythm. Day 2. Perception shifts before reality does. Day 2 is where many people quietly abandon manifestation, because reality still looks the same but you don't. That morning, emotional coherence arrived faster. Assumption felt natural, almost automatic. Meditative receptivity produced something unexpected. Not excitement. Not inspiration. Clarity. Throughout the day, my perception sharpened. Conversations felt more precise. Distractions lost their pull. Subtle cues stood out where noise used to be. Spiritism explains this clearly. When alignment begins, perception adjusts before circumstances do. Reality hasn't moved yet, but your interface with it has. Neville called this entering the state. Spiritism calls it cleaner resonance. Late on day 2, an email arrived. Not money, not a breakthrough, just information. But it reframed timing in a way that instantly reduced friction around my goal. This is how intelligent unfolding works. It doesn't shock you, positions you. On-screen text. Alignment sharpens perception first. Visual. Time-lapse of dawn breaking. Day 3, the first external movements. By day 3, something had stabilized. I was no longer emotionally invested in when the outcome would arrive. And paradoxically, that's when movement began. Assumption felt unnecessary. The state felt settled, familiar. Neville described this as the Sabbath, the moment effort drops away. Spiritism describes it as cooperation becoming possible. That afternoon, a conversation unfolded naturally. No scripting, no intentional steering, just presence. And that presence placed me at the right point in the sequence. A door opened, not dramatically but unmistakably. Later that day, another shift occurred. Financial but indirect. A delay lifted. A condition changed. Still not the $500, but undeniable motion. This is where many people sabotage manifestation by tightening control again. I didn't. I stayed in set it and forget it. Because Spiritism teaches that once cooperation begins, interference slows it down. Visual. Calm walking shot. Forward motion without rush. What changed in the first 72 hours? By the end of day 3, 3 things were clear. Urgency was gone. Mental noise had quieted. External reality had begun adjusting, subtly, intelligently. This is the phase Neville students often misread. They look for proof instead of continuity. But manifestation doesn't ask for belief here. It asks for non-interference. And that restraint allowed days 4 and 5 to escalate rapidly. Because once resistance dissolves and perception sharpens, timing accelerates. Especially in this 2026 energy of new beginnings and highest timelines, where so many are shifting from hustle into true alignment. In the next chapter, I'll walk you through days 4 and 5, the point where internal alignment crossed into clear, measurable external results, including the moment the unexpected $500 finally appeared. That's where alignment became undeniable. Let's continue. Chapter 4, Days 4 and 5. When alignment turns into measurable results. By day 4, something important had shifted. I wasn't doing the practices anymore. I was living from the state they created. This is a subtle transition and one most people miss. When manifestation works, it doesn't feel like effort. Feels like normalcy catching up. Day 4. When things start falling into place. Day 4 began quietly. No excitement. No anticipation. Just a grounded sense that things were already in motion. This is what Neville Goddard meant by living in the end. Not emotional celebration, but no longer needing reassurance. Spiritism explains this stage clearly. Once coherence stabilizes, the intelligent field stops responding sporadically and begins responding consistently. That consistency shows up in practical ways. On day 4, I noticed tasks that usually felt heavy became lighter. Decisions required less mental effort. Timing improved without planning. Nothing here looks supernatural, but friction was dissolving. That afternoon, I revisited something I had previously dismissed, not out of urgency, but because it suddenly made sense. This distinction matters. Aligned action does not feel rushed. Feels obvious. Spiritism teaches that guidance often appears as calm clarity, not pressure. On-screen text. Aligned action feels obvious, not urgent, visual. Steady forward movement, no abrupt cuts. Day 5, the $500 moment. Day 5 is where the experiment crossed a line. Not emotionally, objectively. The morning followed the same rhythm. Coherence. Assumption. Receptivity. By now, assumption no longer felt like a practice. It was background orientation. Later that day, a message arrived. Unexpected. Unplanned. Unconnected to any conscious effort. It involved money. Specifically, $500. Not a gift. Not a miracle. Not something illogical. It was money that made sense, arriving through a path I hadn't anticipated. And that detail matters more than the amount, because it didn't come from visualizing harder, affirming louder, or emotionally pushing. Came from positioning. Spiritism would say the conditions had finally aligned. Neville would say the state had been assumed long enough to externalize. What stood out most was my reaction. There was no shock. No adrenaline spike. Just recognition. On-screen text. Confirmation. Not shock visual. Gentle wave or a puzzle piece fitting perfectly. That's one of the most overlooked signs of true manifestation. When it arrives, it feels familiar. Why this was different from past manifestations. I had manifested money before, but this felt different. In the past, I tracked signs compulsively. I worried about timing. I emotionally depended on the outcome. This time, I wasn't monitoring progress. I wasn't emotionally invested. I trusted the unfolding. The result wasn't just financial. It was stability. Spiritism reframes success not as attracting objects, but as entering cooperation with intelligent timing. That's why results often arrive sideways, through conversations, conditions shifting, or delays dissolving. Not through force. What days 4 and 5 proved. By the end of day 5, 3 conclusions were undeniable. Alignment produces consistency, not randomness. Action becomes intuitive instead of stressful. Results arrive when resistance is absent. This wasn't luck. It wasn't belief. And it wasn't coincidence. It was sequence. And sequence matters. In the next chapter, I'll break down what most people sabotage immediately after results appear, and why maintaining alignment after manifestation is just as important as achieving it. Because the real question isn't, can you manifest? It's, can you stay aligned once you do? Especially in this 2026 energy of new beginnings and highest timelines, where maintaining the state is the real game changer. Let's continue. Chapter 5 After the result. Why most people lose alignment right here. Manifestation doesn't usually fail before the result. Fails after. This is the part almost no one prepares you for. The money arrives. The opportunity opens. The relationship shifts. And instead of stabilizing, people collapse back into effort, fear, or over-control. Both Spiritism and Neville Goddard warned about this moment, even if they use different language. Because the state that produced the result is not automatically the state that sustains it. The most common post-manifestation trap. Here's what usually happens right after a win. The nervous system spikes. People think they're excited, but they're actually reattaching. Thoughts shift from, "This is unfolding naturally," to, "What if it stops?" From, "I'm aligned," to, "How do I make sure this continues?" That subtle shift matters. Because alignment isn't fragile, attention is. Neville called this falling out of the state. Spiritism describes it as breaking coherence. Different language. Same mechanism. On-screen text. Surprise equals separation. Why results create more resistance than lack. This sounds counterintuitive, but it's critical. Lack is familiar. Success is unfamiliar. When something works, the mind rushes in to protect it. And protection often looks like control. You start monitoring outcomes, replaying the result, seeking repeated confirmation. That monitoring reintroduces urgency. And urgency, as we've seen, is resistance. Spiritism explains this clearly. Once cooperation begins, interference reduces efficiency. Not as punishment, but because noise disrupts clarity. How I prevented post-result collapse. After the $500 appeared, I made a deliberate choice. I didn't emotionally celebrate. I normalized it. Not by flattening emotion, but by familiarizing the result. Internally, the frame was, "This is consistent with who I've been being." Neville emphasized this when he said, "Do not be surprised when it comes." Surprise implies separation. Familiarity implies ownership. On-screen text. Surprise equals separation. Spiritism would say this keeps the relational channel open. The maintenance shift. From desire to identity. This is the shift that sustains everything. Manifestation isn't maintained by repeating desire. It's maintained by identity consistency. Once the result arrives, the internal question changes from, "How do I get this?" to, "How does someone in this state naturally operate?" That question removes effort. Because identity doesn't chase, it expresses. Spiritism frames this as coherence across time. Neville framed it as remaining in the state. Same principle. On-screen text. Identity desire. What I did differently after day 5. I didn't increase practices, add affirmations, chase the next result. I reduced input. I stayed coherent. I stayed receptive. I stayed ordinary. And the unfolding continued. Not explosively. Reliably. That reliability is the real marker of alignment. Why this chapter matters more than techniques. Anyone can learn techniques. Few people learn state continuity. That's why manifestation feels inconsistent, not because it doesn't work, but because people exit the state that made it work. Spiritism teaches that cooperation deepens with stability. Neville taught that persistence in the assumption is everything. They were describing the same truth. Alignment isn't something you activate. It's something you remain inside. Especially in this 2026 energy of new beginnings, highest timelines, and fast momentum, mastering state continuity turns short wins into lifelong abundance. Chapter 6. The subtle habits that quietly break alignment, and how to catch them before they do. You've done the work. You've aligned. You've seen results. And yet, the momentum slows, the flow stutters, or the next level feels blocked. Most people blame external circumstances. The real culprit is almost always internal, subtle, almost invisible habits that reintroduce noise into the field of consciousness. These aren't dramatic mistakes. They're quiet ones. The kind that feel harmless, even logical, until you see how they quietly shut down cooperation. Spiritism and Neville Goddard both point to the same truth. Once alignment is achieved, the fastest way to lose it is through unconscious interference. Here are the 5 most common subtle habits that break alignment, and exactly how to spot and neutralize them. The just checking habit: you assume the state you live from the end, and then you peak. A quick mental scan. Is it here yet? A glance at the bank account, the inbox, the relationship status. Feels innocent. It feels like being practical. But Neville warned, every check re-impresses the opposite state. It says, "I'm not sure it's done." Spiritism explains it as reintroducing noise. The moment you doubt the unfolding, you disrupt the clarity that allows intelligent response. How to catch it. Notice when your attention drifts to evidence-seeking. Replace it with a simple internal redirect. It's already unfolding. I'm just living normally. Do this once and watch how fast the urge fades. On-screen text. Checking equals re-impressing lack. The what if it stops? Loop after a win, the mind loves to play defense. What if it reverses? What if this is temporary? What if I lose it? This is fear disguised as caution. It's the nervous system trying to protect the new reality by imagining its loss. Neville called this falling out of the state through opposition thinking. Spiritism calls it breaking coherence. The emotional spike of fear creates turbulence in the field. The fix is radical simplicity. When the thought arises, don't argue with it. Don't analyze it. Just return to the feeling of normalcy. This is my new ordinary. Familiarity starves fear. Doubt needs attention to survive. On-screen text. Fear of loss equals the fastest way to invite it. Over-celebrating or over-storytelling, you get the result. And immediately tell everyone. You replay it in your mind like a highlight reel. You mentally high-five yourself constantly. Feels good. Feels like gratitude. But excessive celebration creates separation. It implies this is special, which means this is not normal. Neville taught, do not be surprised when it comes. Surprise equals separation. Spiritism adds, emotional spikes, even positive ones, introduce noise that can slow the next unfolding. The solution? Normalize quietly. Feel quiet gratitude once, then let it integrate. Treat the result like breathing. Present but not constantly remarked upon. On-screen text. Over-celebration equals subtle separation. The next big thing, rush one manifestation arrives, and the mind immediately jumps to the next. Great, now manifest double. Now go bigger. Seems ambitious, but it's actually impatience, which is resistance in disguise. Spiritism emphasizes coherence across time. Rushing disrupts stability. Neville described persistence as remaining in the state, not leaping to new states before the current one solidifies. Catch it by asking, am I fully at home here or already fleeing to the next? Anchor in the current state longer. Let it become your baseline before expanding. On-screen text. Rush to next equals instability in the now. Subtle self-doubt masked as realism. You catch yourself saying, I'm aligned, but let's be realistic. Manifestation works, but I still have to prepare for the worst. This is the sneakiest one. Feels mature. Feels responsible. But it's double-mindedness. Neville called it trying to serve two masters. Spiritism frames it as divided coherence. Half the signal says, yes. Half says, maybe not. The antidote, radical acceptance of the state. When realism creeps in, gently redirect. This is my reality now. Everything else is old news. Over time, the old voice quiets. On-screen text. Realism after alignment equals hidden doubt. Why these habits are so dangerous? They're subtle because they masquerade as normal thinking. They don't feel like negative vibes or bad energy. They feel like caution, excitement, practicality, until the momentum stalls. The good news, once you see them, you can't unsee them. And catching them early keeps the channel open. Spiritism teaches that cooperation deepens with uninterrupted coherence. Neville taught that persistence in the assumption is everything. Together, they point to the same conclusion. The real mastery isn't getting the result. It's staying in the state long enough for the trajectory to become permanent. In the final chapter, I'll wrap this experiment together. What the full 7 days taught me, the biggest takeaway for anyone starting their own journey in 2026, and how this relational approach can turn manifestation from occasional wins into a sustained way of being. Let's finish strong. Chapter 7. The Full Experiment. What 7 days taught me, and how this changes everything for 2026. We've walked through the entire 7-day experiment, from the initial discomfort of questioning the law of attraction, through the quiet recalibration of coherence, the subtle shifts in perception, the first movements, the arrival of the $500, and the critical work of maintaining alignment after the win. Now let's step back and look at what actually happened. This wasn't about forcing a miracle. It wasn't about believing harder or visualizing longer. It was about completing the picture the law of attraction and Neville Goddard left open. Manifestation isn't a solo act. It's a relationship with an intelligent field that responds when you become coherent, aligned, and non-interfering. The biggest takeaways from the 7 days. Relief is the first proof. The moment urgency collapsed on day 1, everything began to shift. Relief isn't flashy, but it's the signal that resistance has dropped and cooperation can begin. Neville's effortless assumption and Spiritism's clean signal are the same truth. When you stop chasing, the field can respond. Perception shifts before reality does. Days 2 and 3 showed that alignment sharpens your interface with reality long before circumstances change. Conversations become precise. Timing feels smoother. Opportunities appear sideways, not as thunderbolts, but as quiet repositioning. This is the bridge of incidents Neville described, explained through Spiritism as resonance becoming cleaner. Results feel familiar, not dramatic. When the $500 arrived on day 5, there was no emotional explosion, just confirmation. This fits my state. Familiarity is the key marker of true manifestation. Surprise creates separation. Normalcy creates ownership. The real work starts after the win days 4 to 5, and the post-result phase proved that manifestation isn't a one-time event. It's sustained through state continuity. The subtle habits, checking, fear of loss, over-celebrating, rushing ahead, mass doubt, are the silent thieves of momentum. Catch them early, redirect gently, and the trajectory stabilizes. Spiritism completes what Neville started. Neville gave us the how. Assume the feeling, live in the end, persist in the state. Spiritism gives us the why. Because you're not alone in the field of consciousness. Intelligent layers respond when coherence is present, emotional turbulence is absent, and interference is minimized. Together, they turn manifestation from occasional luck into a reliable way of being. Why this matters especially in 2026. This year is being called the year of growth, glory, highest timelines, and new beginnings. People are talking about quantum leaps, aligned action, and manifesting from a place of inner knowing. But without coherence, continuity, and non-interference, even the strongest intentions stall. The beauty of this relational approach is that it fits perfectly with the energy of 2026. It's not about forcing new realities through hustle. It's about aligning so deeply with your state that the highest timeline naturally unfolds, reliably, precisely, and without drama. You don't need more techniques. You need deeper stability. How to start your own experiment right now. If this resonated, don't just watch, apply. Try the 7-day structure for yourself. Morning coherence check, 5 minutes. Intentional assumption from calm familiarity, 5 minutes. Meditative receptivity, open to clarity, 10 minutes. Then live normally without checking or forcing. Track internally. Notice relief. Notice perception shifts. Notice when results feel ordinary. And most importantly, notice when subtle habits try to pull you out of the state and redirect. Comment below. What was your biggest aha from this series? Have you experienced the post-result trap before? What are you manifesting in 2026? And how will you maintain alignment? If this helped, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. I'll be sharing more experiments like this, blending Neville's teachings with deeper spiritual frameworks to help you make 2026 the year manifestation finally feels effortless and sustained. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Remember, you're not manifesting alone. You're cooperating with intelligence already moving around you. Now go live from the end, calmly, coherently, and consistently. See you in the next one. Final conclusion. How Spiritism completes the law of attraction and Neville Goddard. And why 2026 could be the year everything finally changes for you. We've reached the end of this 7-day journey, and at the same time the beginning of something much bigger. What started as a simple question, why does manifestation work so powerfully for some people, but not for others? Turned into a clear, sometimes uncomfortable answer. The law of attraction and Neville Goddard's teachings are incredibly powerful, but incomplete without understanding the who and the how behind the process. Neville gave us the how. Assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Live in the end. Persist in the state. Do not be surprised when it arrives. Spiritism, codified by Allan Kardec, gives us the why. You are not alone in the field of consciousness. Intelligent layers respond, guides, conscious processes, levels of reality that influence probability, timing, and opportunity. When your emotional, mental, and ethical coherence is present, and interference, urgency, doubt, attachment, obsessive checking, is absent, cooperation becomes natural. The 7-day experiment showed, in a practical and undramatic way, relief is the first true sign of alignment. Perception adjusts before external reality shifts. Results arrive feeling familiar, not spectacular. The real test isn't getting the result. It's staying aligned after it arrives. In 2026, a year of new beginnings, highest timeline alignment, accelerated growth, and reinvention energy. This relational approach makes more sense than ever. People are tired of forcing, of repeating affirmations in desperation, of visualizing for hours and still feeling blocked. They want something more stable, more reliable, more natural. And that's exactly what Spiritism plus Neville offers. Manifestation that doesn't depend on intensity, but on clarity. That doesn't depend on blind belief, but on coherence. That doesn't depend on solo effort, but on intelligent cooperation. You don't need more techniques. You need deeper internal stability. When you become someone who lives in constant coherence, the universe doesn't need to be convinced. It simply responds because you're tuned in. So if 2026 is your year of breakthrough, start small and stay consistent. Check your coherence every morning. Assume calmly and familiarly. Receive with openness, not expectation. Normalize results when they arrive. Observe and gently correct the subtle habits that break the flow. The greatest gift you can give yourself this year isn't manifesting one specific thing. It's becoming someone who manifests naturally, because alignment has become your default state. You are not alone in this. There is intelligence already moving around you. When you stop interfering and start cooperating, things move. Thank you for following this entire series. If something here touched you, let me know in the comments. What was your biggest aha moment? What are you going to experiment with over the next 7 days? What manifestation are you committing to keeping aligned in 2026? If this helped, give it a like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. I'll be sharing more experiments like this, blending Neville's teachings with deeper spiritual frameworks to make 2026 the year manifestation stops being something that sometimes works and becomes how I live. You're already on the path. Now just stay on it calmly, coherently, and with full trust. Your highest timeline is already responding. Go live from it. Until the next experiment. With gratitude. Spiritist Light Journey. End of series.